Welcome to the history of early modern English, presented to you in a fun multimedia presentation. Let's start with a basic timeline of England from 1500 to 1800, including special visits from important people during this period.
When the broadening of printing began in about 1500, the broadening of the English language began with it. By 1800, English was significant all around the world and included in academic studies. Many prominent English-speaking authors came from the same country, England, but exhibited wide varieties in dialect in both speech and writing.
Okay, to begin our timeline of British history, we start with the well-known king, King Henry VIII. Henry was King of England. He married 6 different times, which is rather interesting, helped forward the Protestant Reformation in England by breaking away from the Catholic Church, and Martin Luther was also a noted leader in the Protestant Reformation during his time. Furthermore, we had William Tyndale working on his Bible, and we will get to hear from him now.
William Tyndale was born in 1494. He was a Protestant reformer and scholar. Tyndale believed all should have the Bible in their own language. He was also aware that the common people of his day were deprived of knowledge and understanding. Because of this, Tyndale translated several books into English, from the Enchiridion to, most importantly, the Old and New Testaments. His translations were significant contributions to English, as many of his phrases are still popularly used today. For example, scapegoat, fight the good fight, pearls before swine, and eat, drink, and be merry. His translations were not simply paraphrases. Instead, he used beautiful language and composed highly expressive phrases. His fluency in French, Greek, Hebrew, German, Latin, Italian, Spanish, and English allowed for accurate translations.
Isabella Whitney was born in England, perhaps in London sometime in the 1540s, and is believed to have died in the 1580s. She is the earliest identified woman to have published secular poetry in English. Important to note is that Isabella was not a noblewoman, but is thought to have been a member of the minor gentry. She wrote poetry to support her income. Her poetry contains some autobiographical information. More importantly, it contains opinions on controversial issues of the time, such as class consciousness and political commentary.
Queen Elizabeth I was an advocate of literacy and learning, begging acknowledgement as the only monarch, with the exception of King Alfred, to undertake the task of translating Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy. She demonstrated a strong command of written language in the London standard of her day, even in her personal letters. However, she did employ a few idiosyncrasies in her writing, the use of the for not only the article, but also they, for example. Many of her letters to James VI of Scotland and his replies to her have survived.
John Lyly was born in Kent, England in 1554. Lyly became an English writer and playwright. He invented the idea of printing plays for people to read. Lyly is well known for his Anatomy of Wit. Lyly's euphuistic sentences followed principles of balance and antithesis at their extreme, and had an enormous influence on the style of English prose. The royal courts were even reported to have spoken in euphuisms. Despite Lyly's great influence, his success was temporary. By the end of Lyly's life, the educated thought the euphuistic style was ridiculous.
Born in 1572 on the same London street as John Milton was later, John Donne is one of the most renowned metaphysical poets of early modern English. He studied at Oxford and at Cambridge, but because he was Catholic, he was not eligible to receive a degree at either school. He became the personal secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, Lord Keeper of the Great Seal, and was quite prosperous. However, his secret marriage to Anne More, niece of his employer's wife, cost him his career and landed him a short stint in prison. Eventually, though, he overcame these obstacles, renounced his Catholic faith, became Dean of St. Paul's, and a highly influential and recognized figure in the history of the English language.
William Shakespeare, born in April of 1564, died 1616, is regarded by many, if not most, as the greatest English playwright that ever lived. Although much is unknown about Shakespeare's life, we can all agree that his work was that of a genius. We do know that he was well trained in Latin, and from this he would have become aware of the discrepancies between Latin and English. His work including sonnets and comedic and tragic plays, has remained undyingly popular for centuries after his death, and his clever language use has created phrases that are immortal in the English language, including "all the world's a stage," "to be or not to be," among other phrases. Alright, from 1603 to 25 we have James I, who is most well known for commissioning the Authorized Version, or King James Version, of the Bible. During this time we next have Charles I, and during his time we have the union with Scotland in 1603. Later, from 1649 through 1660, we have the Commonwealth, which is basically when the British decided that they didn't want to have a king and they got rid of him, chopped off his head, which they really liked doing, and created this Commonwealth. Also during this time, we have the first American colonies, and we also have the very popular Paradise Lost in 1667 by John Milton.
John Milton was born in December of 1608 into a prosperous family. As a boy, he was tutored at home, entered St. Paul's School at age 12, and later studied at Christ College, Cambridge. He studied classical languages, leading him to a life of writing. Milton became a poet and is best known for Paradise Lost, though his list of works is much more extensive. Paradise Lost, however, becomes even more impressive when one remembers that Milton was blind when he wrote it, creating the poetry in his head by night and dictating it to be written by day. He also had significant translation talent. He translated Psalm 114 from Hebrew into English and Greek. When he was a young man, he wrote letters in Latin verse. His mastery of language empowered him to become one of the most prominent and remembered poets of the early modern English period.
Now, from 1660 to 85, we have Charles II. During his time was the Great Fire of London, which, though very tragic, did a great job of purifying the city of all the yuckiness that was the plagues. After which we have James II, who was ousted during the Glorious Revolution by William and Mary, who reigned from 1689 to 1702, and then from 1702 to 14 we have Anne.
In 1660, with a royal charter from King Charles II himself, the President, Council, and Fellows of the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge, more commonly known as the Royal Society, was born. It paved the way for an explosion of scientific discovery. One of the Society's most recognized and distinguished thinkers was Sir Isaac Newton. Born on Christmas Day, 1642, Newton's early life was uncertain and difficult. However, he soon began to exhibit astounding talent and ability in mechanical and experimental pursuits. At Cambridge, the existing professor of mathematics stood down and offered his spot to 26-year-old Newton. Newton is the father of modern physics, the inventor of calculus, and an influential writer of several works of scientific and linguistic significance.
During the reign of George I, from 1714 to 1727, Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels was published in 1726. Dr. Jonathan Swift was born on November 30th, 1667 in Dublin, Ireland. He is known for his satires, essays, and political pamphlets. His most famous works include Gulliver's Travels, A Modest Proposal, A Journal to Stella, An Argument Against Abolishing Christianity, and A Tale of a Tub. He is best known for his gift with satire, and he used this gift to express his opinions. Though most of us remember his famous work Gulliver's Travels as a very entertaining story about little people capturing a big man, giants capturing a little man, and talking horses, Swift was using language to express his political opinions through metaphor and satire, as well as telling an epic story and making us laugh.
Samuel Johnson was born in 1709 in Lichfield. Johnson left his religion at the age of 8, but in later years determined that there must be some higher power. At 19, Johnson entered Pembroke College of Oxford, but dropped out after only a year. The 2 years following were years of depression. He married a widow 20 years older than he, and opened a private school with much of her dowry. Unfortunately, the school closed after barely a year. He earned money writing poems and articles for various publications. He is best known for his Dictionary of the English Language, for which he was given a pension of £300 a year from the Prime Minister. Johnson's dictionary was the greatest lexicographical contribution.
All right, a little bit more history before we end. From 1760 to 1820, we have the reign of George III. Of course, famous during that time is the Declaration of Independence in America, which is a great work of writing that we won't cover. And this ends our short timeline of the history of the English language.